Diane Tipton, welcome to Partnering Leadership. I am thrilled to have you in this conversation with me.
I am very thrilled to be here, Mahan. You are a great guy and a great leader, and I'm honored to be here.
It's been such an incredible honor watching your leadership, Diane, for now 20 plus years since we first went through Leadership Greater Washington together, and having seen the significant impact you've had through your involvement and through your quiet leadership in the Greater Washington community. But before we get to that, would love to know whereabouts you grew up and how your upbringing impacted the kind of person and leader you've become, Diane.
I was lucky enough to grow up in a small town in Georgia, a mill town called LaGrange, Georgia. It's not quite as small as it used to be, but it's still close on the Alabama border, about an hour south of Atlanta. And it was kind of a Ozzie and Harriet, and that tells my age, upbringing.
Diane, some of the people are wondering who the heck is Ozzie and who is Harriet?
They can look it up, Google it. Anyway, so I had this idyllic childhood where, you went out and you played, and you left the house and in the morning, and you were called for lunch and you were called for dinner. And if you didn't come around, then they sent some kid down the street to find you. So it was just this wonderful upbringing, and I had terrific parents. I did move to Columbus, Georgia for a couple of years in my life. And that was during the 3rd and 4th grade. And that proved kind of pivotal in my life. But it was a great place to grow up, LaGrange, Georgia.
So Diane, in what way was that move so important to you, moving to Columbus?
Well, let's just get right down to it, I guess, Mahan. I was a very outgoing. I needed to know everybody. I guess I could back up and tell you a story about my parents always said that when they put me in the nursery at church, they had one person to take care of all the other kids and one person to take care of me. And I was just that kid that was running around in the neighborhood and meeting everybody. And when we moved to Columbus, Georgia, the beginning of the summer before I started the 3rd grade, it was no different. I introduced everybody in the neighborhood to my parents. I spent all day at the pool because, oh my God, Mahan, we had a neighborhood pool. And I could just walk to the pool by myself and go down there because there was a lifeguard. So I just thought it was the best place in the world to be until I started school. And when I started school, here I am, this kid who nobody knows, who became very, very dark-skinned throughout the summer because I spent so much time in the pool. And I had this very short curly hair. And I go to the bus stop, and I was excited about being on a bus. I was in too small of a town that, they didn't have buses that took us to school. My mom had to take me to school every day. So when I was at the bus stop, I was trying to meet everybody just like every other place I went to in my neighborhood in Columbus. And all of a sudden, these older kids came up to me and they started calling me the N-word. And I will never forget that for as long as I live. It was very hard. And I know that there are a lot of people listening who had to deal with that. But it gave me a perspective on what it felt like and what it feels like to be judged based upon how you look. And I could never presume to try to put myself in the shoes of someone who is Black or brown or any other ethnicity that has to deal with it every single day. But it was a pivotal moment for me in terms of me knowing what it felt like and knowing that I did not want to ever look at people and judge them simply based upon their appearance.
It's incredible, Diane, how that experience, as you mentioned, even for just one bus ride, had an impact on you and how you perceive the world. We can't necessarily put ourselves fully in the place of other people and the experiences that they go through, and many experiences that people of color have gone through, especially in some parts of this country, over many years and decades. But even one experience of it had a significant impact on you. So, from that one experience, how has that shifted how you view the world around you?
Well, I will say that it wasn't one experience. It kept happening to me for a couple of years. And it was significant enough that my parents moved from Columbus because we couldn't get beyond it, unfortunately. We couldn't get beyond the prejudice against me and how people treated me. And my father had to commute for the next 4 years of his life from LaGrange to Columbus, which, and didn't know interstates then, back roads, and it took him a little over an hour and a half each day, but each way. But I will say that it is something that I think about in terms of every interaction I have with people. And I want to just make sure that I look at people. I'm not doing this well, Mahan. I'm not going well with this. Sorry. I want to make sure I look at people as themselves and as they present themselves to me, and not based upon their appearance.
Yeah, you have a tremendous ability to engage with and connect with other people's humanity, regardless of how they present themselves on the outside, Diane. And it's these experiences in life that shape us into who we become. So as you then grew up, you decided to stay close to home and go to University of Georgia. What did you want to do, and what did you want to become at that stage of life, Dan?
Well, there were not that many women role models for me that weren't teachers, and teachers are completely fine role models, but that was just not something that I knew I wanted to do. So there was this friend of mine, and her mom was an interior decorator. So I thought that would be a great thing for me to do. And I decided that I would go to the University of Georgia and I would study art history. So I start with art history, and I love all the history courses, and I put off and put off as long as I can, but I finally have to take an art class. So I take the art class, as I must do, because hello, I'm getting an art degree. And I go into this wonderful studio. You've got these big long tables. There's all this wonderful light coming into the studio. It's just a beautiful setting. And they put an easel in front of me. And the guy says, "Draw." And he looks over my shoulder and he's like, "Huh." So this sort of goes on, and then we have a project that we have to do. And he says, "Pick an artist, pick a particular painting by this artist, and you must do a painting." So I am really nervous by this point in time. This is probably halfway through the course, and I am definitely on his bad list. He is looking at me like, what am I doing in there? And so I choose Amedeo Modigliani because I love Modigliani, and I thought, I can do that. the angles,
Looks
the
easy enough.
elongated, it looks easy enough. I can do that. And he used me as the poster child of what not to do in an art class for the rest of the class.
Oh.
Somehow I made it through, but the only way I did make it through, Mahan, this also maybe shows my age, is by carrying around a bottle of Mylanta that I had to swig every day before going into his class because my stomach was so upset. So obviously there was something wrong with this major.
That's incredible, Diane. I'm glad that on my end, I had a similar experience a little earlier in life. I still remember in Washington International School, Mr. Long was my arts teacher. And he said, Mahan, I'm going to give you a C in the class just so you pass and I don't have to have you again in this class. So sometimes we find out what we are not necessarily good at, which is fine. So what appealed to you about accounting and tax accounting?
Well, my father was an IRS agent, and he had retired at that point in time from the IRS, and he had opened up his own accounting practice. He got his CPA and opened up his own accounting practice in our basement. And so I was home for a winter break, and this is right after the art class, of course. And I'm thinking, what next? What next? What next? And I was working for him, earning a little extra money by filing these B&A tax. I got to look it up, but anyway, I'm going to look that up because it's important to the story. But anyway, these B&A. Can I stop for a second and look it up?
Yes.
Okay. Hang on. I wrote it down. Okay. These B&A tax management portfolios. And I started sitting down instead of filing these things and reading them. And, this is kind of interesting. Oh my God, look at this. Look at these changes they're doing. This is kind of fun. And that struck me as odd because the last thing I wanted to do is be an accountant. That sounded like the most boring thing on the face of the planet. So I started talking to my dad about it, and my mom was also a bookkeeper. So I talked to both of them about it, and I decided that I would go back and change my major to accounting, just like that. And so I started taking cost accounting. This isn't so bad. I couldn't take tax accounting right away, but I took all the prerequisites that you had to take before getting the tax accounting. And then I took tax accounting and just absolutely loved it, and went directly from my undergraduate degree to my graduate degree of a master's of tax and accounting.
Yeah, that's wonderful how we find what we are good at and what we love sometimes with that experimentation, Diane. Now, the other thing that's really interesting is that you played rugby in college. How did you get involved in playing rugby?
I did, Mahan. That is a little known fact about me. And I guess you've now blown my little known
rugby cover.
Yeah, my rugby cover. When I started at the University of Georgia, I was walking across the quad. And I mean, for a girl to go from a small town in Georgia to the University of Georgia, which is absolutely huge, was a lot. And I was walking across the quad and somebody says, hey, you. And I'm looking around and trying to figure out who this woman is calling to. And she had a table and she's like, get over here. And I walk over there and she said, you are a rugby player. You are a back. You're going to be very fast. And I want you to sign up to play rugby. And I listened a little bit and I said, okay, I'm going to do it. Why not?
Diane, you had no idea what rugby was?
no idea what rugby was whatsoever. And of course, being the person that I am, I went to my roommate and I said, guess what? You're playing rugby. So I got her roped in as well. But I will say that I grew up when there was no Title IX, and Title IX had just happened. So they were throwing money at forming a women's rugby team, because they needed these women's Title IX sports in order for the school to stay open. So we had every privilege as the football players. We got to do everything that they did in terms of training. And I had just this incredible experience of leadership and team building and being part of a larger whole that had never had the opportunity to be a part of. And Mahan, I think I will probably have to say that I may be the only person interviewing for Big 8 accounting jobs with a black eye 4 years later.
That's incredible. So when you went interviewing for jobs, you had a black eye, and still Arthur Andersen offered you a job?
Yeah, yes, they did. In fact, they were good enough to be one of 4 firms who were willing to move me up to Washington, D.C., because as much as I love Georgia and growing up in Georgia, it was time to experience something else. And I hadn't really spent any time outside the state in my life. So I took a trip in between my undergraduate and graduate school all the way up to Maine, and checked out Washington, D.C. and New York City and Boston. And they all have all these great attributes, but I felt a little bit like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, saying, this one felt just right with Washington, D.C. So that's how I got to D.C. Arthur Andersen was willing to bring me up.
That's wonderful. So you came up to DC with Arthur Andersen. What was your experience like initially with them, Diane?
They were very conservative. Accounting firms all were. Women wore suits and ties and button-down shirts or silk-collared shirts. And I know that sounds a little odd to many people who might be listening, but we had this, everybody sort of had to stay in a lane of exactly what you're supposed to wear at that point in time. Of course, it's definitely not like that anymore. But they were very accepting of women. They didn't have all that many women in the workplace, and they wanted to encourage more women to join. So they took it as a point of pride that they had a rugby playing black eye woman who had just started at the firm.
So you also met David, I believe, while at Arthur Andersen. How did that come about?
I did. David Bratt, who's my husband, he was sort of the ringleader of trying to get all the newbies, everybody who's newly started, into a social world of Arthur Andersen. It's a big firm, right? So he wanted people to feel engaged and accepted and part of the overall team. So he would organize activities like going to Blues Alley or going out to lunch or just doing a happy hour or things like that. I never ever once worked for him, as did many people did not work for him on his team. But he just wanted everybody to feel part of the overall Arthur Andersen family.
So you ended up then meeting up with David, marrying David, who's been the love of your life all these years. But you also, in your 20s, Diane, changed jobs a lot, which is much more common right now, in that over the past dozen years or so, people have gotten used to younger people changing jobs, but that wasn't the norm. If someone didn't stay with the same organization for a while, they were seen as a job hopper. So, what got you to move around?
Well, Mahan, I'm going to tell you that that is where my overinflated ego probably came into play a little bit. And also the fact that I found out I just didn't like doing accounting. I mean, there was
You like
so many,
studying it.
I did. And I like doing the tax work. I like doing the creative element of it. But I, after being in the master's program, I kind of thought, well, gee, I'm just going to hit the ground running and I'm going to start doing all this research and writing in taxation. Isn't that what everybody does? No, of course, that's not what everybody does. You pay your dues and you go on audits and you do tax engagements and you do, you know, the very boring, I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't say that, but the learning part of doing tax returns and that sort of thing. So I found out about an opportunity to join the National Tax Office, or so I thought, of what was then a Big 8 accounting firm called Ernst and Winnie. There's been a lot of mergers since then, but it was then called Ernst and Winnie. And so I made the jump after only a year and 9 months, which was unheard of. Today it's de rigueur, but back then it was unheard of. And so as I'm getting closer to when I'm starting and I'm about to start there, I get a phone call and they tell me, well, you know, they really need you in the National Utilities Division. And it is going to be taxes. So you're a national tax person, but working in the utility divisions on, drum roll please, the taxation of rural electric cooperatives. Have you ever heard of such a thing, Mahan?
I just can't wait, Diane. It sounds so exciting.
Yeah. Well, okay. Paint drying is pretty exciting too. But anyway, this gentleman who was quite nice had written a book on the taxation of rural electric cooperatives, and I was going on the road with him, and we were trying to promote the utility division's tax work in the taxation of rural electric cooperatives. And so that took us to some really wonderful small towns in America. And let's just say it wasn't exactly what I envisioned as the next step of my career. So, so we parted ways after a year, and it was, let's just say it was very mutual, but probably they were happier to see me go than I was. But no, the National Tax Office was not going to be taking me into their tax department. So that's where I got back in touch with David. I was networking like crazy. I'm 24 because I started college at 16 and went straight through basically through my master's, and I'd finished my master's by 22. So I did not really feel as though I could make another pivot, let's say. The next one needed to stick. And so David and a lot of other people were very instrumental and helpful in helping me decide how to go forward. And one thing that David and others said was to take some time to, first of all, finish my CPA exam and get the CPA behind me, which I did. And I was very fortunate to find what would become my pathway for the rest of my working life. And that was in real estate through the accounting firm of Resnick, Federer, and Silverman, which was quite small at the time. And it's now very large, and it's a firm that most people will know of as Cohen Resnick.
So that,
So, mhm.
yeah. So in that pathway to real estate, Diane, it also gave you a pathway to a field that didn't have many women in it. What was the experience like for you as a woman at what is now Cohen Resnick, transitioning in and becoming more familiar with and working in real estate?
um, that in that particular firm and in that particular area, there were more women, and it was just this. It was a family. David Resnick was this wonderful big bear of a guy who enveloped everyone. He went to mine and David's wedding, just an incredible guy who loved to nurture and mentor people. And he was a huge mentor to me. Um, and so I think that the Resnick model was, it was very, very, very pro women, and he wanted to try to bring women up as fast as he could and make them partner as fast as he could.
Yeah, that's kudos to David for having had that kind of foresight in the organization. So at some point in your career, Diane, you also had an intervention for uh, what others saw as your being too direct and abrupt. What was that all about?
Well, I think that I was very encouraged to be me, and sometimes that at Resnick. And a lot of times that meant that I was very direct and perhaps, not as patient with people that didn't get the concept as quickly as I may have or as I thought they should have. And so when I went into real estate development versus being in a partner at Resnick, because that was my decision tree at the time, I I worked at a real estate development company that was a little more, let's just say, male dominant and very old fashioned, or maybe it was just the way of the times, where women did not really express their opinions quite as adamantly as I did. And so there were so many meetings. We had Monday team meetings all the time. And there were so many meetings. There were other women in the organization, but we would make a suggestion. We would have an idea, be completely glossed over. 30 minutes later, a guy would come up with the same idea and it'd be, oh my God, that's brilliant. That's terrific. It's wonderful. This didn't just happen once. This happened over and over and over again. So there were the other women and I, one was head of marketing and one was head of accounting. We had these, pencils with rubber erasers. And when something like this would happen in the meeting, we would start flicking the pencils on the table just to see, if that managed to get anybody's attention a little bit better. No, it really didn't. But anyway, I'll get back to sort of the intervention story.
Diane, before you get there, it's incredible because there has been a lot of progress in terms of how people communicate with each other, how women and people of color are seen in the work environment. However, still to this day, I think there are a lot of times when I see people in organizations speak differently about a woman that voices her opinion than a guy that voices his opinion. So it is
So
something
true.
that while we've made a lot of progress, we are not there yet. I see consistent bias in terms of, even, as I said, the language we use to describe it. It doesn't necessarily mean that we don't all have opportunities for improvement. And in some instances, the women or the men are being too aggressive and shouldn't be. That said, it's much more often the case that the woman that chooses to speak up is seen as being too overbearing, too aggressive, and other terms that are associated with it, versus a guy that does the same thing is seen as take charge, a driver, someone that initiates. So it still is something that we need to be very sensitive to and aware of.
I could not agree with you more. And I think that women are still not looked at equally. We're not looked at equally with respect to pay. I do know that I have had to have a lot of conversations about making sure that I was dealt with equitably and fairly and got the opportunities the way others did in various companies that I worked for. And one of the things that I love to tell girls, because Girl Scouting and being engaged with Girl Scouting, as you know, Mahan, I can't believe we talked this long without talking about Girl Scouting.
We'll get
Um,
there.
I know. Is such a big part of my life, my history, my lifeblood. And one of the things I love to talk to girls about is do not be timid about talking about money. Do not be timid about talking about being treated equally. And I think that that is true of a lot of girls, that they don't think about things in terms of talking about money. And it seems to be a more comfortable subject for boys and for men than it is for girls and women.
And it is one of those things, Diane, that we can have conversation around for hours. As father of two girls, I noticed that even from when kids are very small, the way the society communicates with them, the way images are presented to them in media, social media, all around them, what is expected of good, proper girls versus good boys, all of that has certain levels of bias and expectations baked in, that then when people come into the work environment, those same things are carried along with them. So it is something that I wanted to highlight, that there has been progress because of women like you in the work environment being willing to tap those erasers and speak up. At the same time, it is something that we need to make even more progress around. Now, you were mentioning the intervention of the group with you being too direct and abrupt.
Right. So, yes, I was called into the owner of the development company I was working for, into his office, and the president was there and a couple of male vice presidents, not a female there. And I was like, what's going on? And they said, well, we just want you to know that you are just a little too aggressive, and you are a little to the point, more too much to the point. And, you know, I think the B word may have been used, but that just may have been in my head what I heard. But um, should I say that, Mahan? I'm sorry.
Uh, Diane, that's the experience.
So anyway, it was shocking to me, quite honestly. It was shocking. And I decided that the last thing I should do is to respond at that moment. And I just said, I hear you. I understand. It wasn't a situation where they were trying to say, you make this change or else you're no longer going to be welcome in the company or what have you. They just thought it was better for me if they en masse gave me this message. And I will tell you that you do have to read a room and you do have to read an audience. And I would be I would be the first person to say that you need to make sure that you are interacting with people in a manner that makes them comfortable. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be your authentic self.
Yeah, there is a level of what you're mentioning, Diane, which requires our awareness in our interaction with other people. We all have blind spots. We all have opportunities for improvement. So there are two elements to it. One is sometimes the feedback we receive from others is their perceptions, and their perceptions can be biased. So some of the feedback that women get, some of the feedback that people of color get, has that element of bias baked into it unintentionally, but still has that element of bias baked into it. That said, there's also good pieces of the feedback that we need to take and improve ourselves based on our own understanding, and in order for us to reduce our blind spots. So it doesn't mean that you didn't have opportunities for improvement. It could have been a combination of a certain level of bias and expectations with respect to some of the men around you, and additionally, an opportunity for you to develop in the way that you engage with others and the way you communicate with others.
I completely agree. And I have a tendency, or had, I hope it's had a tendency to be impatient with people when they did not get a concept quickly enough for me. So I did take it to heart, and it helped me stand back and listen more and try to be more patient and understanding with people.
And that is really important, Diane. One of the things I keep mentioning with respect to leadership is the fact that we all have blind spots. And if anything, the more positional power we get, the bigger our blind spots become, because people around us become more mindful of the feedback they give us. So it is important for us to be in tune to it. You continue to also work on yourself and improve yourself. So what led you to starting your own self-storage company, Diane?
It was an opportunity as a result of the Evans company, the development company I was working for at the time. The owner, David Evans, decided that he wanted to phase out of business. He decided he wanted to sell and take a more passive approach to real estate and not continue with the large development and management company for office development. And so we had done a couple of self-storage facilities, and I had also done some accounting for self-storage facilities at Resnick, and just felt like it was a terrific asset class. So about the time that we started at our Leadership Greater Washington class, Mahan, several of us, including the president of the Evans Company, Steve Garchek, we started our own self-storage company. And that was in 1997. And we've gone through a few iterations since then. We started off developing in Washington, D.C. We started in New York, New Jersey. We're now just back in the D.C. area. And I have another partner who is a terrific partner with me. And one of the big decisions that I had to make at the time when we started this company was, would I be an employee of a company, or would I be an owner of a company and take all the risk associated with that? And that was actually a pretty quick decision for me, but it's made all the difference in the world in terms of my overall career path, and also how much I have enjoyed growing this company as an entrepreneur versus an employee.
You have done an incredible job growing it over the years, Diane. It is a space that has also transformed. I don't think back in 1997, if you talked about self-storage, too many people would have run across self-storage. Now, most people would have become very familiar with the entire space. But you have also helped grow this organization over the years. Now, one of the things that makes you special, Diane, is while you were starting the company and dedicating so much effort and time as a owner to it, you still were very committed all throughout to the community. As you mentioned, initially involvement with Leadership Greater Washington and involvement with different elements of the community, most especially Girl Scouts. So would love to know, what is it that keeps you so involved in the community? And then how did Leadership Greater Washington impact that before we then get into your love and passion, which is Girl Scouts?
You're making me wait, aren't you, about talking about Girl Scouts?
You're waiting for those Girl Scout cookies. You want the cookies.
I should have a box with me right now. Well, my parents were both very, very involved in the community. So I grew up with a model of servant leadership. And it's going to get me into my Girl Scout story. So I'll wait for that for just a minute. But I knew from the moment I had any time that I could call my own that I wanted to volunteer. And so at the beginning, when I moved to Washington, D.C., I volunteered for, it's not the junior league. Oh gosh, I'm not remembering what it is, Mahan. We're going to have to sort of X this out.
I started volunteering.
Okay, fine. Okay, starting again. So when I first moved to DC, I started volunteering, and I wanted to volunteer in any capacity I could. And it led me to ultimately Girl Scouts. But Leadership Greater Washington, I'm sorry, this is just something I hadn't thought about. So we're gonna have to start all over again. I apologize, Mahan.
No worries.
Because it's throwing me that I can't remember the first organization I volunteered for. When I first moved to Washington, D.C., I wanted to volunteer as soon as I had any extra time whatsoever. So I started volunteering for a couple of organizations, but I wanted to get more engaged. And I was doing some work with the Chamber of Commerce for Arlington, Virginia. And they said this organization called the Women's Home needed some board members. So I became a board member there. And then I started working for Resnick. And so that led me to more of a real estate focus. And I started looking into Jubilee Housing and started volunteering and got on the board for Jubilee Support Alliance. Give me a minute, sorry. When I was working with Resnick, I saw a lot of real estate similarities with an organization called Jubilee Support Alliance. And a lot of people that I was working with as brokers, as attorneys, and also as developers and construction companies, they also volunteered with Jubilee Support Alliance or Jubilee Housing. So I got on the board of Jubilee Support Alliance and had a great time volunteering with them and learning all about the Church of the Savior ministries in Adams, Morgan, and ultimately became the president of Jubilee Support Alliance. And from there, I of course, met Lyle's car, and Lyle's was saying, you should join Leadership Washington. It was then called Leadership Washington, not Leadership Greater Washington. And I was fortunate enough to be in the greatest class, of course, our class, Mahan, the Icona class. And it was a terrific year meeting some absolutely incredible people. And I then got on the board of Leadership Washington.
So that service to community is something that you got from your parents, and you've been very engaged in the entire region through different organizations, including Leadership Greater Washington. And you are right, Diane, the class of 98 Icona class was the best class of Leadership Greater Washington ever, but we'll just keep that a secret between the two of us. So you've also repeatedly mentioned, now we get to the cookies part. I know Girl Scouts is a big part of your passion, your love, your commitment. You had served on the board for 12 years, 6 of it as its president. You are back on the board of directors of Girl Scouts. What gives you so much energy and passion for Girl Scouts, Diane?
Well, I have to go back, Mahan, to how I got involved with Girl Scouts to begin with. My father was an incredible Boy Scout leader in LaGrange, and he had his big focus, and he thought all Boy Scouts should become Eagle Scouts. He made so many Eagle Scouts, it's unbelievable. And as a daughter, he would drag me along to all of the Court of Awards, where I had to sit through all of the eagle pinning ceremonies, including my brother's. And you want to know who pinned my brother's eagle on him, Mahan? John Glenn.
Oh, wow.
My dad somehow got John Glenn to come pin on my brother's eagle, as well as 7 other Eagle Scouts from that year. And I'm sitting there saying, you know, what is the equivalent for girls? Because I, of course, became a Girl Scout in the 2nd grade as soon as I possibly could. And I was extremely engaged in Girl Scouting. You might not be surprised, Mahan, coming back to the cookies, to find out that I sold more Girl Scout cookies than any girl in the Pine Valley Council for several years. Not competitive at all, okay? But I kept saying to my leaders, where's our eagle? Where is the Girl Scout eagle? And we are a 110-year-old organization that's had a highest award for 106 years, that may be the best kept secret you've ever not heard. Have you ever heard of the Gold Award, Mahan?
Actually, I hadn't, Diane, until reading your bio.
Okay, I have made my point. It's still unfortunately too big of. So I did earn my Gold Award. I kept bugging my troop leaders until they figured out what needed to be done and what I would have to do to earn my Gold Award, which I did. I was a troop leader of my daughter, and she earned her Gold Award. And it is an incredible, incredible achievement that about 4,000 girls a year in Girl Scouting earn. And I have, as you know, been on the board of Girl Scouts of the nation's capital, the largest council in the United States. I was the president of Nation's Capital for 6 years. And until I got on the board of GSUSA, I said it was the best volunteer job I possibly could ever have. But now I am in my ultimate dream volunteer job, and that is being a member at large on the GSUSA National Board. And I co-chair 2 committees that involve the Gold Award. One is a Gold Award Scholarship Task Force, and the other one is, looking for scholarship for a foundation, potentially, for the Gold Award. So we have a lot of work to do as a national organization. I hope people listening to this podcast will look up the Gold Award and that they will look at any resume that comes across their desk of all the women and girls that you're now going to put to the top of your pile, and even put at the higher top of your pile any girl or woman who has earned her Gold Award in the past.
It is something that is really important. And I know the Girl Scouts also develops a lot of both confidence and skills and capabilities in young women, Diane. So would love for you to share some of your thoughts and perspectives on what it is that young women today need and how the Girl Scouts meets those needs through development and supporting them all throughout the different stages.
Um, if you wouldn't mind, Mahan, repeat that question because I want to make sure I get the right nuance there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so let me clarify it instead of just repeating it. Uh, what is it now that girls need the most that Girl Scouts helps them with? What are the capabilities? What are the skills? What is the confidence? What is it that Girl Scouts does for girls today? Because one of the things, Diane, and I'm not going to include this part of it, is with so many more activities, with so many more options, with society having changed, the needs of today's girls to a certain extent are different than the needs were 10, 20 years ago. So right now, what are the needs for the girls' development and how does Girl Scouts meet those needs?
We consider ourselves the absolute premier girls leadership experience, bar none. We have been doing this a long time, and the element of Girl Scouting that is evergreen, pun intended, is how we create the leaders of tomorrow. We try to make sure that girls are in a safe space to develop as they are, who they are, their authentic self. Our tagline is building girls of courage, confidence, and character that make the world a better place. And that is exactly what we do. If you look at every female Secretary of State, she was a Girl Scout. If you look at female owners of companies, 80% of them were Girl Scouts. If you look at women in Congress, in the Senate, a large majority of them were Girl Scouts. It's not just, it is not just that type of leadership experience. It is being your best authentic self. And it is also trying to make sure that you have your own voice during a period of development as a girl that is so difficult when you have so many things and so many influences that are not positive. We are a positive, safe place for girls to develop.
And that leadership development, that confidence, that ability to have a voice and use that voice for impact is something that has been important, but becomes even more so important in the years ahead, which is why Girl Scouts value has become higher for the girls and young women that engage with it. Now, Diane, in part because of your impact on the community, your leadership, whether it's with Girl Scouts, Jubilee Housing, all around this region, and in Leadership Greater Washington, this year in October, you are being honored in celebration of leadership as a leader of the years. So the Leadership Greater Washington membership is going to get together, honoring and celebrating your decades of contribution to this community. Would love to know what that award means and represents to you as a person that has done so much and given so much to so many throughout these years.
Mahan, I'm still speechless. I'm overwhelmed with this honor, and I want to first of all say that I am not a person who typically likes to have the focus on them. I like the focus to be on the organizations that I'm supporting and promoting, or the company I'm building and the projects I'm developing. So this is very overwhelming for me to receive this honor and to be in the company of Rosie Allen Herring and Alex Orfinger and Artis Hampshire Cowan and Lyle's Carr. It's just unbelievable that I don't consider myself that type of a volunteer and leader in the community. So I am overwhelmed with this honor. What I do want to do, and the reason that I am so excited about talking to you today, Mahan, in Partnering Leadership, is I want to show girls, all girls out there and all women out there, that anything is possible, that you can come from very humble beginnings, as I did, and you can take all of the negative feedback and all of the adversity and all of the setbacks, and you can repurpose them and turn them into a different pathway that is your pathway. And I know that at each of the points in my career and in my life where I have felt that there was a great deal of adversity, it seemed to be for a purpose that I was able to turn into a positive, and I could not feel more fortunate that I was able to do that. And that's part of what I want to message in all that I say with this great honor that I'm to receive in October.
It is an outstanding message, Diane, and I wholeheartedly believe that it is important who we choose to celebrate and whose stories we choose to tell. So when we celebrate people and tell stories of people who have been committed to giving back, have succeeded against odds, have been able to make it through and serve as good role models, then in your case, all young people and young girls, most especially, can look at it and draw inspiration and say to themselves, I too can become like that person and aspire to be more like them. So when we celebrate only the stories of the outlier entrepreneurs that did whatever it took to make the most amount of money, then we are teaching our community and our society that's the path to go. One of the beauties of celebrating leaders like you, as Leadership Greater Washington does, is that you are the kind of leaders, and you, Diane Tipton, are the kind of leader we want more girls to learn from and to aspire to want to become.
Thank you, Mahan. I really can't thank you enough.
Now, Diane, I wonder, in addition to you wanting to impact girls on their trajectory, are there any leadership practices, resources, anything you typically find yourself recommending, in addition, obviously, to involvement in Girl Scouts, for whether it's young girls or younger leaders as they aspire to be as impactful as you've been, both in your career and in your impact in the community?
I'm going to honestly say I am not a big instructional reader. I didn't read much when I had kids or how to raise kids, or I have been doing more of being engaged with podcasts like yours and listening to them than I have in the past, because the technology allows us to be able to go for our walks and runs and exercise, and also improve our minds and be engaged. So I don't have any real guidance in that regard. I think that with respect to girls, I would just say that they should find someone a mentor they want to emulate, and to try to follow them, whether it's Maya Angelou, who I do read, or whether it is their Girl Scout leader, or whether it's a teacher or anyone else, that they should try to find good mentors. And I would say the same thing of men and women as well.
Well, I appreciate, Diane, for you having been a mentor to emulate to me, to so many in our community, to so many girls, as you have continued in your journey and your leadership and your impact. Really honored and thrilled to have had you on this conversation, Diane Tipton. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much, Mahan. The hour went by quickly, and I enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you very much.